as is becoming a yearly tradition, Saturday, October the 7th was Synthfest down in Sheffield. And I know what you're thinking, why is a bass player going to Synthfest? This is first and foremost a bass channel. Well, you're not wrong in thinking that, and I am first and foremost a bass player, but if you've heard any of my music, you know that it's a combination of largely fretless bass and synthesizers. For those of you who don't know, Synthfest UK is an event held in Sheffield at the Octagon, I don't know if it's Classes Arena, Octagon Centre, that's what it is. And it happens once a year, all the big synth brands go, although Roland weren't there this year, which was a bit disappointing, but most of the big synth brands go, as well as a lot of local builders, and there's a bit of a, not a modular meet, but there's people bring along synths that they've built and synth collections. There's seminars, there's all sorts of great things. If you're into synthesizers, you might really enjoy. This video could be very long. There's lots of stuff that I got to see this year, and really there's so much going on at the event, you can't see everything within the day. In fact, there's so much going on at the event, there's often things you don't get a chance to see. In particular, I wanted to see the Expressive E Osmos and the Oberheim that they had there as well. Both of those things, the queue was just far too much every time I went past, so sadly it's still to check those things out. But there was just so much going on that I couldn't fit it all in one video. So we're going to just look at the highlights today, the things that really stood out for me. And the first thing on that list has to of course be Wonky Stuff. Wonky Stuff is run by John Tuffin, I think I've got that name right. He builds modules for the AE Modular from Tangible Waves. And it's great having the AE Modular represented at Synthfest. It plays a big role in both my studio and my live setup. In fact, it's in a flight case over there just now, in my live setup from the gigs I've been doing this year. And his drum modules play a massive role in my onstage drum sound at this point in time. But he's also added something pretty impressive into the mix now, and that's MIDI modules. And there's all sorts of things going on. A MIDI breakout module that takes MIDI on a TRS jack into the modular. So there's there's a MIDI oscillator, there's a trigger module, which is really cool, definitely going to be picking one of those up. MIDI CC messages, so being able to convert that into control voltage to control filters and stuff. And then there's also a clock divider. So some really cool stuff on the MIDI front coming from him that were there at the show, which was really cool to see. In fact, I'm not describing this anywhere near as well as John did himself. So I'm going to cut in some footage right now of John explaining that, because honestly I was sold as soon as he did this. So let's check that out.
So yeah, so we've got, this is OPZ multi-channel sequencer. We're on channel 5, we've wired channel 5 through to the mono oscillator here, so fine, so you can sequence that through here. You've got parameters to change parameters of the sound, and of course you're recording like any other sequencer, you just sort of sequence things. So there's that. Let's say, so the thing that's in demo is a firmware that I'm playing with. Let's put it on channel 6. So we go to channel 6. Polyphonic oscillator.
Really?
Exactly the same hardware, but it's like a sawtooth, so it's just a sawtooth wave. And then, so the idea is that you use that to tune it relative to whatever else you've got.
That's fantastic.
And of course that's got pitch bend as well. So but that's very much in the vein of old style sort of string synthesizer. There's no fancy envelopes or anything. It's just like sawtooth, it's on and off. But you know, to be able to throw in some chords.
Fantastic. Well, don't make me plan up. Thank you very much for demoing that.
Next up on my list is the Play All Day, Play Fade CV Looper. It does have some MIDI things going on as well, but it's a really impressive CV looper that can work with the expression pedal input on pedals, which obviously this was a synth event, but as a bass player it was great to see someone making something that was really targeted at not just synthesizers but also effects pedals, because there's a big kind of crossover point, I think, between synthesis and effects, and it's no secret that I really like effects pedals. So this was another really cool one for me to see at the event, and he was kind enough to demonstrate it for us as well. So we'll cut that in now as well.
Yeah, it's a CV, Play Fade is a 2-channel CV and gate looper, and we've designed it so that it plays with synths as well as pedals equally well, right? So on this side we've just got a very simple example where it's working to pitched voltage. And you can set major, minor, chromatic and user scales on that, and then you can loop your gestures, so that will just keep looping. And if I jump over to this, you'll show you on the unquantized CV, we've got this going into 2 expression inputs on here and here. Here it's controlling some faders, and there it's controlling the delay length division. Sorry. And if I press play, let's have a look. So at the moment that's just playing these notes, and when I hold play the CV value gets updated and put out, so now I'm changing the delay timing, and I can loop that. So now that's looping, and then I'm going to loop the faders. If you look over the faders, and this is just a 16-step pattern, but I can extend that pattern as long up to 64 steps, which is quite a nice thing to do. But what's happened there is quite handy. It's extended that 16-step pattern. It's duplicated it 4 times. So now I can go to the end of that pattern. So it's now like it's basically going to keep playing, and then it will probably around now. So you can create nice little kind of tails to your patterns and things like that. And yeah, in terms of scaling, one of the things we've done to really help it play nicely with all pedals is when you hold scale, you can set your scale setting so you have 2, but 3 and 5 and 8 volts, and most guitar pedals are 3 and 5 volts, right? So as long as you have a floating ring cable, which even if you don't have a floating ring, I've found a nice little hack around where you get a little Y cable and just use the tip output. You can basically expression control all your pedals with a whole bunch of fun and create patterns. And because it's MIDI or CV clock synced, you can have a MIDI clock coming out of any other pedal. It could be driving the MIDI clock out of any pedal as well into pedals, so it can be a real hub for like a big pedal board, but like hands-on. And because the thing is, pedals have moved. They're still on the floor, but there's a lot of pedals on the desk now as well.
I'm having that battle myself. There's so much stuff I wish I had hands-on control of it.
Right.
That just would be great to have.
Yeah, so you can have like long cables. It could be maybe sat on your amp, for example, and your pedals on the floor, and you just like drawing patterns on. Yeah. So yeah,
that could be a bit of a game changer there for pedals. That.
I hope so. You know, I mean, I know it's a synth show, and I am a synth nut, but like, I'm really excited about having something different for pedals, because there's so many amazing pedals out there that like things like the microcosm and things like that, and like to get more expression control and patterns in there.
Yeah.
Like, really cool. And
That's it. Another thing as well is
and it fits in the bag with
the
your
synth guys always get that stuff right.
Yeah, right.
Sometimes it takes time for it to filter down to the
Yeah,
pedal world,
totally.
and it's so that's good to see.
And I was a guitarist when I started, like in my 20s, and I went to the dark side of synths, right? But I've always never lost my love of pedals, and always just like thought, you know, and I do, you know, you can of course send LFOs out of your modular and stuff, but you need a modular to do that. And why do you want, you know, if you just want to use the beauty of CV,
Totally standalone.
it wasn't, you know, so yeah. So and then yeah, the idea is that can fit in your gig bag, and just plug in wherever you go.
Perfect. Well, thanks very much for that.
Yeah, pleasure, mate.
Hope to see this again soon at some point. That's brilliant.
Next up is the Maximus from Analog Solutions. If you're into synthesizers, you've probably seen this all over social media because it kind of broke the internet a little bit with its announcement. It's a monster synth, and one of the chaps over at Analog Solutions was kind enough to demonstrate it for me. I certainly didn't want to touch it. Not a synthesizer that's over £20,000. That's cost, not weight, but it is a big beastie as well. Like I say, one of the guys from Analog Solutions was kind enough to demo it for me and let me film his little playthrough. It sounds huge. Next up on my list is not actually someone that was demonstrating gear or one of the brands there, but it's the seminars that they host. This year there was two big ones, and they were both fantastic seminars to watch. The first one was the Theremin seminar, and this included performances from Lydia Kavanagh, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right, but she performed on 3 different Theremins, kind of different ranges from Moog, and her own theremin as well. If you don't know anything about Lydia, I learnt a lot about her at the event, and it was just mind-blowing to see what she can do with a theremin, but she also trained with Leon Theremin, the man himself who created the theremin. So that was really impressive to see that, and to kind of hear some of the history, and also see things that a theremin can do that I would never have thought of, including its MIDI control capabilities, and the modern ones that is. Sadly, I didn't actually film any of that one. I basically got so caught up in listening to the performances that I forgot I had a camera with me. Honestly, that performance in seminar was unbelievable. And the second one wasn't too far behind either. People that know me and know the synths I'm into know that I love the Yamaha DX7 and I love FM synthesis. In fact, Volca FM, which is the poor man's DX7 these days. Highly recommend these, by the way. Fantastic little synths. And this seminar focused on FM through the ages, basically, the origins of it, the history of the format, and included performances of presets created by Dr. Manny Fernandez, who created some really incredible FM sounds. Sounds that you wouldn't think were FM, including a piano sound created purely with FM synthesis that was mind-blowing as a sound. There's no sampling involved, and it just was unreal. So between the history of FM and also his demonstrations of the sounds he made, it was really a fantastic thing to sit and listen to. And I was a little bit more with it with this one and did get some footage of him demoing his sounds. The thing is, there's also so many other brands that I would love to include in this video, but there just isn't the time for. So I've got a list, and I'm going to rattle through I can't even say that. Rattle through a few. I'm going to talk you through a few of the ones that really impressed me. So, Yamaha, the CK61 and CK88 keyboards. They were unbelievable to play. Really nice sounds, particularly the string sound. I was combining it with effects at the event, and I could have stood there all day playing with that sound. Unreal what that can do. So really impressed with those. Was also lovely to speak to Mike and the Mechanics keyboard player as well. Next up on my list is Soundgas. Every year they come with a table full of vintage synths and stuff I can't afford, and this year was no different. Some really impressive stuff. Had an old Space Echo, which obviously they service those, that's what they're really famous for. Some really cool synths, some really quirky stuff, and their LFO box as well, which I think is going to be quite impressive. There was also that new spring reverb pedal from Ecofix. I think I'm getting that name right. That thing, I didn't even hear it. That thing looks so impressive, I want one. So yeah, a lot of stuff that was really cool at the Soundgas booth. Next up, PWM Malevolent. Last year's event, that was the highlight for me, was that synth. I love that thing. Played one again this year. Other than the fact someone had left a really weird patching on it when I went to play it, it was just brilliant. I love that thing, and I think it might be my favourite analogue synth out just now. Next up is the Ableton Push 3, in particular the standalone version. I use Ableton in my live set, and I'll be honest, part of me still wants to get the computer out of my live setup. So it was quite interesting to get to look at the standalone version of it, which is basically an Ableton Push with Ableton Suite, Ableton Live Suite, installed inside it. So there's no computer needed, it's standalone Ableton. Really impressive. Not cheap, at the time of filming this, about £1,600. It's not a cheap thing, but really impressive, and the people at the booth were really helpful in explaining it, so thank you to them as well. Next up are a few kind of quirky booths they had, which I found was really impressive. Kongburn, who had the Strokes sequencer and the Dispatch Max for Live device. They were both kind of plugins for Ableton. I'm not explaining that well at all, but he was really good at explaining what was going on. They're really impressive things he's created there, and I'm definitely going to be looking into them for my own setup, because they were really impressive what they could do. As well as that, we had the Hitar guitar percussion, which was quite cool to see. It was basically percussion triggered by banging on the guitar. It's a technique we've seen guitarists using for a long time, but this is actually triggering drum samples or drum sounds when you do it. So it was good to get to talk to him and see how he's doing that. That was pretty cool. Next up is Synth Cables, who make illuminated synth cables and, well, really, names as it says on the tin, really, they make synth cables, cables for Eurorack. They also had a Grogu head, which for any Star Wars fans you'll probably know what that is, with cables stuck in it, which was yeah, that was cool. Apparently it was the most talked about thing at his booth, and I'll be honest, I can see why. It was pretty cool. A couple other ones are worth mentioning as well. Zoom, the live track mixers that can record, and the H series, so the H5 and all the other ones for the recorders, the field recorders. That was really cool to get to see them in action and get a few questions I've had about them answered. Dreadbox, their booth is always impressive. I always love seeing what Dreadbox have. Always really helpful, always really nice at the booth, and yeah, same goes for this year as well. Really cool seeing their booth. Also Korg had some great stuff. Still had an OP6, which I'm kind of gutted has been discontinued from what I'm aware of. Did have the OP6 SE, but again, like the Expressive eSynth, could not get near it. So hopefully we'll try one of them at some point. And then of course lastly, you have all the source distribution stuff alongside PWM. So you have Moog, Arturia, Eventide, all that stuff. That was pretty cool to see as well. And it was great to see the things that people brought themselves. So there was a couple of Moog clones, like the Model 15 I think it is, modular setup. can remember that word there. And of course there was a wall of FM synthesis which sounded huge, and I could have spent all day at that, if I'm honest. That was really cool to see. So lots of great stuff. I'll definitely be going back next year. Highly recommend it to anyone, even new bass players who have a little bit of an interest in synths. You'd have a ball playing all this stuff, and it's a lot of fun. Highly recommend going next year if you get the chance to. Thank you again to everybody at the event who demoed gear for me, let me film at their booths, let me take pictures. It all adds to being able to do this video, so without them this doesn't happen. In particular to John from Wonky Stuff and all of his team at the booth. Incredibly friendly, really good to talk to. There were definitely some modules at his booth, both his own and ones he just had on display from his own rig, that I'm definitely eyeing up in the future. So thank you all so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please hit like, subscribe down below, click on the bell icon to be notified of more content when it comes out. I promise there will be more bass specific content coming very soon as well. Thank you everybody that's been checking out my music, checking out the videos I've been posting from the gigs lately. All that means a lot to me, so thank you so much. Links are down below if you want to check out more of my music. It means a lot when people do that. And until next time, and if you've got any questions about Synthfest, or you were there and have any products you really liked seeing, please leave them down in the comment section. I'd love to talk to you all about the event. So thanks again for watching, and until next time, keep working on those bass faces.